I promised earlier, we're continuing to get more reaction on the SONA. We're now joined in studio by Noncedo Madubedube from Equal Education. Very good morning to you. Thank you so much for making the time to come in.
Good morning. Thanks so much for having us.
Your thoughts on the President's State of the Nation address, especially in relation to education. He was saying that he now wants better outcomes. We should have a future of better outcomes in education. What do you understand him to mean?
I mean, I worry, first of all, because this concept of the best way to develop and get a better education system is outcomes-based is quite problematic, because it isn't grades that make school a good opportunity for people to learn, right? It's the fact that it comes or makes part of a societal commitment for sort of social goods and is able to grow holistically learners in various ways.
Yeah.
So our approach to schooling has always been a strong consideration around the social wage issues that make the school environment conducive for learning and growth for young people. But I mean, I'm seeing that a lot of the sort of projections made, whether it's education or otherwise, have a 10-year span. And it's good because he's talking to things around, I think things civil society and research institutions around education have put to the table, around early grade sort of reading and studying. He's also spoken a little bit about safety, very bland, but I mean, it's there. He's talking about sort of the digital world and what that will do in education. That's a bit of a stretch. But my point is that it's obviously connected to the sort of grand plan around the National Development Plan. And it's good for education to be a key priority of that, because it is sitting in crisis. And so, I mean, our responses are, the rest of South Africa is calling it a wish list. And I'm saying, I mean, SONAs are in nature meant to do that kind of thing. Help the country dream, talk in broad strokes about the things that will be developed. The only thing that worried us really is that it doesn't respond quite as much as we'd like to the immediate realities of the school community in South Africa. It doesn't speak at length about the interventions and the call and the mandate, as a matter of fact, on issues around school violence and school safety. It doesn't speak at length around the mandate and the issues around school infrastructure. The President had a breakfast last year, launched a SAFE initiative. I don't even think he knows where that's gone. Civil society, school communities don't know which schools have been prioritized, who's getting the sanitation, will there really be an eradication of plain pit latrines? Yesterday, in a post-SONA interview, Angie Moteka said, what timelines and deadlines are you speaking about? There's a whole law that she's meant to be complying with that says in 2016 there shouldn't be a plain pit latrine in a school in South Africa. But you still had Lumkam Ketwa's death right after that. And so, I mean, we're sitting with a problem. We're sitting with a crisis, and I think as he dreams, he must bring his ministry with him. His executive must come on board. He must be able to speak to the mandate that they've been given in quite a sharp way. When he came into office, he announced his cabinet and said, look, they're going to be accountable, they'll be transparent, they'll be capable. We're worried if those are the characteristics that can truly describe Angie Moteka. With regards in particular to addressing some of the demands we sent to her office, I think it was last week, Tuesday, on the 18th of June.
So you're talking about this 10-year span, which gives the sense that the President says he'll be here for 2 terms. Is that a long enough period to address problems? Is there a sense of commitment?
Look, I don't even think he's talking about himself, really. He could be talking about an ANC majority-led government to follow through this NDP plan. And I mean, I appreciate in the sense that it is so forward-thinking and it uses some of the bases that exist. But what we're saying at the moment is that, look, the priorities in the moment for the DBE are a mismatch with what's needed at the levels of reality. The reason school unions, teacher unions are calling for things like arms in schools are as a result of a lack of coordination between different ministries and departments. Absolutely. And the onus on being able to coordinate departments and ministries is squarely placed on the Presidency's office, and he needs to step up there.
So when you say there are all these other things to look at, why do you think the President would have specifically focused on making sure that children can read for meaning, which is for entry level into school, the very thing that the DA's Musi Maimane has said it amounts to praising a fish for swimming?
Look, it's this notion of an outcomes-based sort of bettering the education system type approach, and it's a very Western ideal, right? And it's something that's going to be difficult for South Africa as a developing country, one with the largest rate of inequality to be able to achieve in the next 10 years. And that's why we're always saying you have to look at the approach to bettering education holistically.
You're saying what it is, but I'm asking you, of all the issues that you say exist, and some of them life-threatening, why would the President choose to focus specifically on this one? Are you saying that he is not interacting with people such as yourselves who are on the coal face of challenges facing education?
Look, so part of our demands do cover this issue around the ability to read for meaning. And I'm saying things like, so for instance, in that specific address, right, he speaks about how you'll be able to punch in resources to assist with early grade reading. He doesn't speak at length about the coaching that's necessary to be able to follow up or I don't know, subsidize those resources.
Yeah.
And so we're saying all of these things matter. The social wage issues, the inside the classroom issues matter as well.
So the president is speaking from governance and at the top, you saying that Angie Motshekga is also not in touch with issues. Let's talk about the Department of Basic Education and your concerns there.
Look, so for instance, let me talk about infrastructure, right? Because that's something we squarely focus on. We have this law, right? And she's missed deadlines and not complied with deadlines, as a matter of fact. Those are in breach of a law that protects learners and teachers in different school communities.
And do you know why she has missed deadlines?
I mean, it could be capacity issues, the things that we've identified, and I want to tell you why. So this is what this law also says is that at the end of each year, provincial departments must submit reports that show sort of the process of addressing the backlog issue of infrastructure. But most provinces submit poor reports, and the Department of Education puts these reports on their website. So, and typically as civil society, we have to pay to be able to get these reports, and they typically come in months after they're meant to come in any case. We're still waiting for the NIMS report with regards to infrastructure today, and that had meant to be coming out in January. So there's something going on there, and to us it always feels like a lack of a carelessness, a lack of care with regards to the effects that sort of their poor performance has on teachers and learners.
The MEC for Education and Gauteng, Panyaza Lesufi, has been getting heaps of praise in terms of developing infrastructure in this province. Is it realistically progressing? And give us a sense of the whole country in terms of what the infrastructure challenges are.
Look, the sad thing is that these provincial reports that I'm speaking about, so Gauteng, for example, the last 2 years' reports look exactly the same. And there isn't a financial a breakdown of how they're planning to use money in different financial periods. And therefore, we can't even say clearly that these things are working, right? And he's got a hashtag, a school a year or school a day, or whatever it is. But we also know that he too is in breach of the norms and standards for school infrastructure. Because in Gauteng, there are still schools made of asbestos. And he hasn't been able to sort of follow through and eradicate those schools or better the infrastructure in those spaces. And the thing is, the populist nature of the politics in our country is really is threatening. And because of inequalities and access to these kinds of platforms, we're unable to tell these stories in a way that can be listened to by the general public in general South Africa. And I think what Gauteng people need to do in particular is pay attention to what's happening in schools. School violence is on the surge in this province.
We talk about it every day on the show.
And there still isn't a strong coordination of different ministries. We've been calling for the very same thing in the Eastern Cape. And there's a connection there. These urban provinces have got other sort of societal structural issues that make them volatile, for lack of a better word. And so this thing of going, this is the dream, this is the NDP, and so for society, come help us, is nonsense. Because there is capacity and money inside government to make these things happen.
So as equal education, do you feel that nothing is being done or not sufficient?
Not sufficient. And part of it, and the reason we can't even be sympathetic, is because there's no transparency. And there's also a hard backlash around accountability. So when you do go outside Panyaza's office, it's story. If you do try to speak to Cyril, he's not responsive, promises you a response, and tells you that I'm an action-orientated government, but people aren't actually actioning anything. When you speak to Angie Motshekga, she goes, I don't know what you speak of. This is a law she signed, and she was part of promulgating. It's a disgrace, and I'm worried for school communities in the country.
What about higher education?
Higher education, we do a little bit of work on as equal education, and I think when we come back at a later stage, we'll be able to properly speak on that. I've been focusing mainly on sort of the ills of basic education. The only thing we did at some point worry about there is that this call for free education, no matter what it looks like now, because it's change in variations, students have to pay money to register, had a very ill effect on the infrastructure budget, in particular for basic education. So doing one thing to produce a legacy for Jacob Zuma took from others a basic need for societal good in order to help learners learn.
Really? So we've been talking to different civil society organizations, and there's quite a sense of optimism that there's a renewed vigor in terms of interaction with civil society. Do you get that sense or not really? Because I'm sitting here talking to you and thinking, shouldn't the president have at least reached out to civil society in education before pronouncing on what he wants to do with education?
I mean, there's a variance in that. He could have reached out, but it also depends on who. And sometimes it depends on how you action sort of these responses, because we're a social movement, and if we aren't able to speak to you via the email or around a table with line of sort of advocacy approaches, then we'll take to the street. And I don't know if that's always well received, and that's the accountability thing I was talking about, because part of the ministry's oath is to say I will adhere to public participation. When people call me, I will come, because those are the people you represent, and it's difficult for us.
What would you prefer to create a conversation in a structured way?
I mean, we have to sit down around the table in the streets. There has to be a way where people can afford the appropriate response to go, look, some of the things you've pointed out as equal education are playing part in the way that we design and plan for our years, from the from the near-term budget to immediate-term goals and plans for various departments in education, in social development, in community safety, for SABC, treasury as well. And other departments. So internally, you'll find that you've got champions for equal education, people that get their hands dirty and want to do the work. But the political will is just a mystery to me.
What are the effects of the things that you say that the ministry is not being accountable for?
It's death in some cases. It's talking to learners that will say to you, and these I'm talking about reflections and talking to equal education members who go, look, as a result of the type of education I get, I really don't think I'll go anywhere in life. And you can't be building a society that's going to feel like that. The economic growth and the dreams the president is sort of spewing, who are all of those things for? If the people that are most sort of on the fringes of South Africa's sort of wealth are feeling, and the majority, as a matter of fact.
And one of the things he spoke about is introducing coding to primary schools. And my assertion is that coding has been introduced in other countries like 10, 15 years ago. Are we playing a catch-up game?
No, absolutely. And as a developing country...
And is coding important?
I think so, definitely. We need to look... I'm for this appeal of like tech schools, but it needs to correlate or simultaneously run with providing basic services. Make sure that school buildings will not fall and kill learners in KZN whilst you think about the tech. Think about the socioeconomic environment the school lives in. A lot of schools become sort of targets to violent crimes of communities, burglarism, vandalism, because they carry laptops and computers, resources that the communities don't have. So these things need to sort of equitably be prioritized.
What needs to be done to bring South African education up to standard? Like I said, one gets a sense that we're always catching up. I was talking to somebody the other day and saying all the big companies of the world were started elsewhere. When will we get an education supposed to prepare our young ones to be able to be part of innovation in the world, isn't it?
Look, I'm going to cite things from what members have said at Equal Education, and it's always best because they speak from first-hand experience.
Absolutely.
So learners have been speaking about the social wage issues, which are things around scholar transport, getting to school at a desired time. I'm not tired. There aren't chances of like sexual assault on the way. I don't walk more than 5 kilometers. That's a necessity. School infrastructure is important. Classroom sizes have become important. Teacher support, psychosocial support for teachers in light of the changing sort of social fabric of the country.
And the curriculum?
Absolutely. And thinking deeply about when we say outcomes-based education, what do we actually mean? And how do we catch our teachers up to the changing nature of this, or what this curriculum presents as well? And thinking deeply about the issue around language. So in the first foundation phase period of school learners, the swap between a first additional language and a home language is quite dire, and it has different effects for a school that is in an urban area pre-Model C and what it does for in a rural community. So catching up learners in terms of their reading capacities, if you're going to do early grade reading and provide coaching and resources, those considerations need to be sort of spoken to as well.
What are the plans for equal education in terms of interacting with the 6th administration?
We're working on lining up a meeting with the Department of Basic Education. Our provinces, we've got sort of footprint in 5 provinces. We're working on having meetings. Having meetings with those provincial ministers. We really would like to sit around a table with the president as well and figure out, in line with the priorities that they've put together with Angie Motshekga, how do the different things that learners have been speaking about most prominently feature. And what are the timeframes? We're still interested in being able to sort of insert ourselves in that treasury space. We're looking to use legislation as well. It's Parliament's been a great space for us to be able to inform policy on grounded primary and secondary research. And as a matter of fact, we do also want Cyril Ramaphosa to withdraw the chairperson of the Education Portfolio Committee.
Really?
Zukisa
Tell us about that.
Has been accused of fraud. She's in fact convicted and was on house arrest for 3 years as a result of poorly using, fraudulently, municipal sort of finances. And now she's being put into...
What organization is that?
It's a Zukisa Fako.
Of the...
Of ANC.
Oh, okay. But which
MP.
educational structure does she head?
The Education Portfolio Committee inside Parliament.
Oh, inside Parliament. Yes.
So it's a space we've previously been able to use quite well. Very engaged, able to talk to different members of Parliament on an informed basis on some of the priorities that Education Department puts out, and advise in a way that's like really sort of conducive and accepted by sort of the champions inside the DBE. And it's a pity that the President says, look, it's going to be a new government of accountability and capacity and capabilities, and then on the other hand, you've got someone who's clearly shown they can't be trusted with government resources as the head of this Education Portfolio Committee, and I worry that it's another case of cadre deployment. So who must suffer at the end of the day?
Noncedo Madubedube, thank you so much for making the time to talk to us this morning from Equal Education. Yet another aspect in terms of looking at reactions to the State of the Nation address last night. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. We're asking you a question today. What stood out for you from the State of the Nation address? As you just saw now, what stood out for us was pronouncements in terms of education and what will be done in that space. Let us know at the agenda_SABC. We'll take a look at some of those comments when we come back from a break, but also tell us your thoughts about our conversation with Noncedo Madubedube. Let's take a break.